The regular season is over. The playoffs are about to begin tomorrow. There were some thrills, then the Tigers finally made it into the playoffs, and some just depressing things from the Mets who didn't make the playoffs. We're going to talk about some of the exciting stories of the last week in baseball, and give you our picks for the playoffs, and tell you what the teams did individually this season. It's This Week in Baseball. And this week in baseball,
the regular season is over.
It ended all at once. On Sunday, all the teams played at 3:10 p.m., so all the games kind of finished at the same time. And I think the most surprising thing to me this season is that the Tigers didn't have the choke that everybody thought they were having, because they did make the playoffs, so they did not win the division. And the Mets didn't make the playoffs.
And they did have the choke everybody saw.
And they did have the choke that everything saw. So we'll talk more about the Mets, because I know all you guys who know us as Met fans want to feel the pain and the suffering, understand how we feel, and there's a lot of that.
Yes. But we want to kind of just go through the teams, go through the season. It was a great regular season. We'll look back at the picks we made, for who was going to,
some record-setting performances.
Right. We saw almost the greatest divisional, you could argue that it still is the greatest divisional collapse of all time, considering the Tigers didn't win the division.
Yeah. But when you have a divisional collapse in the old days, you didn't make the playoffs. So you had a league collapse. And you didn't even make the World Series.
But I guess we can start at the top, because I think if you're really looking at the way the leagues finished out, I think the American League ended up being more interesting than the National League. The American League, they actually ended up performing better, and we spent the whole season crowing about how good the National League was.
I think the real thing that caught my eye was that the Astros, who didn't make the playoffs, and that's a stunner in Houston, right? And they had their own problems all season. They did win 87 games, so they finished 12 games over. And that wasn't good enough to make the playoffs, where the Reds and the Mets finished both with the same record, except the Reds got the tiebreaker, and they only won 83 games.
Right, it's rough. You win 4 more games and you don't make the postseason in the American League.
Right. So, and instead of the Astros being in the playoffs, the Mariners finally didn't choke. The Blue Jays finally didn't choke.
Right. So we can just start at the top there. So the Blue Jays, they're the ones that win the American League East. Finally, capitalizing on all the talent in the.
Neither of us picked the Blue Jays.
Right. Well, we had both finally bailed on them for years. We've been talking about
I picked the Blue Jays, and that's what they needed. They sent me a little note before the season. Please don't pick us.
Right. They needed to finally stop believing them. They're going to get it done. But you know what? For the first half of the season, we looked like we had made the right pick by not picking the Blue Jays. And then they just turned it on and played great over the second half. And I think what you could really do is behind that starting pitching, there's a lot of other guys in that lineup besides Vlad Guerrero Jr. That is not a team that is powered by their first baseman. It's powered by the full set of guys in that lineup. I think they might be the only team that has 2 guys batting over 300 in their lineup.
And Bichette finished second in the American League in hits to Bobby Witt Jr., who had 184. There were no players that had 200 hits. In fact, Bobby Witt Jr. had the most hits, 16 short of 200, which, boy, it's just hard for me to believe that guys can't get 200 hits anymore or come even close.
Right, but I bet if we looked at the number of home runs hit this year,
well, that's a great point to make, because we almost had 5 guys hit 50 home runs. The almost didn't happen because Eugenio Suarez had 49, which I saw wasn't the first time he hit 49. He hit 49 in 2019.
Junior Caminero hit 45 and Soto hit 43. So we had a monstrous home run year across the major leagues.
And obviously led by Cal Raleigh, who set the all-time record for catcher home runs with 61, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Judge hit his normal 55.
He hit a 53.
53. I'm sorry. Shohei hit 55. My mistake. And Schwarber had 56, right? I think so.
You had 3 guys hit above 55 home runs this year. That's not something we've seen since the steroid era, basically.
Not that we're saying anything about that.
Not that we're saying anything.
So, and I think so.
I don't think anybody looks at Cal Raleigh and thinks, oh, yeah, that guy's on steroids.
Those power numbers were pretty impressive. There have been 50 home run seasons 35 times, and we had 4 of them this season. So that just tells
you a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And Max Fried of the Yankees, and we said the Blue Jays, they won the division. The Yankees finished with the same record as the Blue Jays, but they lost the tiebreaker.
Right. Max Fried did lead the American League in wins with 19, which really the Yankees needed that so much with Garrett Cole going down. And it really makes you wonder how good they would have been if they had Cole this year.
I think that's a great point, and we questioned them, and I did. Well, not we. When I didn't pick the Yankees to win the division, and you did, and I picked the Red Sox. Neither of those teams won the division. I thought, well, it was going to be hard for the Yankees with that pitching to get there, and I knew Fried was good, right?
But everybody else in that. If you wanted to see the difference between the two New York teams, it is in the way their starting pitchers responded this year. All of the Yankees starting pitchers, for the most part, stepped up. You got a solid season from Heel and Rodon. You got an unbelievable season from
Heel was injured a lot, but he pitched okay when he did pitch.
Right.
And Will Warren came in and gave the Yankees a lot. Cam Schittler last whatever you say, however you say his name.
Right. And so, you got enough from your starting pitchers, whereas compared to the other team in New York, they had to go and get the rookies up there to actually get a good start from anybody, with maybe in the occasional 3 innings of good Clay Holmes.
Yeah, and so the Yankees will in the first round they're going to play the Boston Red Sox.
Right. And this is what makes the American League fun, because they're 2 wild card rounds.
These 2 teams don't like each other.
Hosting a 3-game series against the Red Sox, and the Guardians hosting a 3-game series against the Tigers.
Yeah, and you have basically divisional rivalries that have to go one more series before you're going to get.
It's going to be great.
The 4 playoff teams.
Absolutely phenomenal.
So Seattle is sitting there waiting. They like I said, they didn't choke. They won their division. They won it somewhat handily by playing great at the end of the year.
They will play anybody but the Yankees.
Right, and
no. The Blue Jays will play anybody
but the Mariners. The
Mariners will play most likely the Yankees,
or the Red Sox.
Red Sox, because both of them have better records. So whoever wins that series,
and the Cleveland Detroit will play obviously the Blue Jays.
Will play the Blue Jays, right? So
the Mariners.
There's a very good chance you're going to get a there's a good chance, especially if the Yankees don't win, you're going to have a team that almost never makes it out of the AL, making it out of the AL to the World Series this year. You could see a long World Series drought ending for somebody, provided it's not the Red Sox.
Provided it's not the Red Sox. So you had teams in the American League East that didn't make it. The Orioles never got it out of their own way to start the season, and really could never get back into it.
I think the best thing for the Orioles is that they didn't. They were so bad through that stretch. They kind of recovered enough to play decent baseball in the second half, and you can think, okay, if the young pitchers come back and literally our entire rotation doesn't get hurt, we should be better next year. The problem is that that leaves the worst team in your division being Tampa Bay, and they're not that bad. So you're just in a brutal division where somebody's got to be in last place.
And I really thought Tampa would be hurt by not having any games in their really home ballpark. They're in the Yankees spring training facility, and they're going to do that again. I think it's going to be ready next year, so they're going to play in the Tampa Stadium, and they just got their ownership squared away, so hopefully they're going to build a stadium for the Rays, and they'll actually have a home of their own. They were actually
better at home than they were on the road.
They were better at home than at the road, but I think that really was going to affect them, and I guess it did enough, although they just simply didn't have enough horses either to compete, I think, with some of the better teams. So, they gave it the old school try because they were in it through the middle of the year before they finally succumbed.
Kansas City was a team that just, never quite had enough this year. They floundered too much in the middle, and they needed to go too much of a run on the end. And they're still too much a team that feels like it's a bunch of guys trying to help Bobby Witt Jr., who's got to do it all.
I think Vinny Pasquantino had a really nice year for them. I think Salvador Perez had a very nice year for them.
So how many more years can you expect out of this from Salvador Perez?
Here's my take on the Royals. I think, and it's nothing against him, but if I were the Royals, I would find a new manager.
I think that's not a bad idea.
Matt Quatraro is a fine guy. He got the job a couple of years ago. I just feel like you need to change what's going on there.
I think they need a new manager and one free agent signing. I think they have to be in the market for some kind of guy to add to that lineup to make it a little bit more dynamic.
And the Twins with Derek Falvey,
they sold everything.
They had sold out at the deadline. But I think they got to decide what they want to be, and they're having ownership problems.
Which makes me think the moves they made makes it look like they're getting ready for a tear down.
I don't know. I don't know.
And I think the best thing that you could say about the Chicago White Sox is that they were a regular bad, sort of this year.
They were better than last year, which is saying not much.
But they were just a bad that you could have just be like, oh yes, they're a bad baseball team. They're not like, oh my god, they're the worst team ever. We got to talk about that with the Colorado Rockies.
Right. Well, we'll get to them. And then in the West, you had
We got to give Seattle their credit. They
Absolutely.
finally responded. The Etsy witches came through. They placed their hex on, all the other teams.
and going and getting Suarez to add to Raleigh
and Naylor.
Really, like those two late season acquisitions, I think matter because I don't feel like the Mariners are devoid of offense anymore.
No, they have clutch hitters in that lineup. You're not just praying that Julio Rodriguez and Colorado can do everything for you. And you know what? That's a team that's got a lot of momentum. I hope that the break doesn't hurt them, because I would really hate for them to have like the Yankees or the Mariners stroll on into Seattle and dispatch of them quickly. It's been a fun series. They're a team that's been so desperate to make the postseason.
Right. They haven't been in the postseason in so long. They've never made it to the World Series, and there are a lot of people in Seattle that are saying this is the year we're going to make it. Now they've got, I guess this is his second year because he came in last year during the year. Dan Wilson is their manager, so I have no idea what to expect from this guy
in
this
postseason.
In this
right.
postseason.
And that'll be a big test for him in the postseason.
I think so. So I'm excited for them, and I'm excited for the chances that you could have a team get to the World Series that's never been there before.
I think if you're a Houston Astro fan, you're sad. You much like the Mets, you didn't make the playoffs.
You never got Jordan back.
You
never did.
You're right.
And he's such a great player. That's such a big loss for them. And I thought you had an uneven year as Framber was okay late, but he wasn't the Framber they needed him to be, even though he was pretty good, which is hard to believe.
But at the same time, you could tell he was never happy, because you don't need to look anything past that weird cross-up.
Hitting his own catcher.
Right, because he legitimately just seemed like he was mad at the guy and wanted to hit him with a pitch. And then Hunter Brown was good, but he didn't take that step into almost supplanting Framber as the ace.
He had a really good year, though.
Right, but you thought that's what he was going to take that next step and go from being a good pitcher and guy that's a great number 2 to being the number 1, and you're like, oh wow, Hunter Brown might compete for a Cy Young kind of thing.
So in the American League, you're going to take Skubal as your Cy Young over Crochet, I assume.
I think so. Skubal led the league in the American League in ERA. He led the American League in WHIP. Finished second in strikeouts. He didn't really have the wins, but I think we've all kind of come to the conclusion.
Right. Max Fried goes 19-5. And no one's talking about him as a Cy Young, even though one loss record-wise, he was the best guy, because people don't value wins and losses that way anymore.
Because
it's really
wins
interesting.
And losses are a function of we've come to realize they're a team statistic. You as a pitcher don't have a lot of control over your own wins and losses, because you could throw 7 brilliant innings of shutout ball, but if your team didn't score in those 7 innings, you can't get a win.
No, how well Mets fans know that.
I don't think, not with these starting pitchers. We don't know that.
So one thing that did happen this week, let's talk about a little baseball news before we go to the National League, and that is that robo-umps, or ABS, were approved for the 2026 season. So when we start playing baseball in the regular season again, there's going to be automatic balls and strikes. So the way that they're going to do it, though, is it's going to be a challenge system. They're going to offer each team 2 challenges a game, the way they did it, in the All-Star game and a couple of in the preseason games. And I think, and I don't know how you feel about this. I know that you are in favor of it. Generally, I know that as I am, and I think just because of what I said all the time about what happened in tennis, that I think this is just a precursor to what's going to end up being all the pitches will be called by.
And here's why I'll go even faster, because the speed at which you'll see the transition will depend about how often the batters are right when they challenge. If they're right a lot when they challenge, they're going to speed up the transition to automatic balls and strikes, because the umpires are going to hate getting challenged and lose.
I think in the test thing, it was like 52% of the time the batters were right. So that's not as much as I would have thought.
So that's good enough where the umpires can kind of be like, okay, you guys don't necessarily know. You're just mad sometimes and you're wrong.
If pitchers are the worst, by the way, at challenging balls and strikes.
I expect the batters to be better at it because they have a better luck.
Catchers are the best, which is no surprise.
I think if the overall challenge rate creeps above like 75%, then you're going to see the switch come faster, because then that's basically saying, okay, yeah, the umps are getting wrong a fair bit of the time.
And to be fair, it's not the exact same thing in tennis, because in tennis you have a fixed line that you're trying to see if the ball hit at 100 miles
It doesn't
an hour.
matter how big,
you don't have that fixed nature in baseball,
right?
The zone, and they started using this sort of opaque sort of a slate, if you will, as a I guess what's going to be used for and so you can kind of see where it goes and what's a ball and a strike. And I think that you're right. The umpires aren't going to, like it if they're made to look bad.
Right.
And I think the players are going to say, you know what, the heck with the challenges. Just let the thing call the thing. It's not like the umpires don't have anything to do. I keep saying this. Oh, this is going to be, Joe Posnanski wrote, this is going to be the beginning of the end of the home plate umpire. No, it's not.
You still need somebody to call somebody safe.
It's all kinds of things the umpires have to do, not just keeping track of the pitch clock, by the way,
right?
Calling balks. There's plenty for the umpire to do, and the game should be a better game. The imperfections that are there by having umpires call balls and strikes incorrectly don't make any sense to me.
No, nobody actually enjoys that.
So, all right, well, let's talk about the National League and a team we haven't really even mentioned at this point yet, because we haven't talked about the National League, is the team that got off to a poor start in the National League behind the Mets and ended up blowing their doors off and winning the division going away.
The Phillies didn't get off to the best of starts, and then they ended up winning 96 games. So,
and they're a formidable, battle-tested
If
playoff
I was going to
team.
pick my favorite out of the National League, I'd probably pick the Phillies
over the Dodgers.
Over the Dodgers. I just think that the Phillies lineup in combination with their starting pitching, I think, and the back end of their bullpen. The Phillies at least have Jarren Duran. I don't think the Dodger fans are excited because Blake Triernan's about to come into a game to pitch.
But the Phillies, who have the National League batting champion in Trey Turner, who I believe played on Sunday for the first time in a while just to get himself into a game, he finished over 300, and they will not have Jose Alvarado in the playoffs. Their fireballing left-handed, who was suspended for PEDs early in the season, came back after 80 games, but as a result of that suspension,
can't play in the playoffs.
Can't play in the playoffs, and I think that's going to hurt him.
I think it's going to hurt him, but I think still, when you look at the other teams in the National League, I think the Phillies have the best combination of starting lineup and starting pitching.
I agree from the I just think that this is the Phillies' year. Right. This is what they have to think going, the Dodgers are a little shaky. We need to win now. This is it.
We'll come back to the Mets because the rest of the National League, the rest of the National League East, Miami they played at an 87 win pace since the month of June. They have a lot to look forward to next year, but I feel
you got a wacky manager who is challenging convention in an interesting way, Clayton McCullough.
I feel like we saw this story play out a couple years ago with, I believe it was Skip Schumacher as the manager at the time.
Well, he got out of there.
They were a scrappy little team. They made the playoffs. Everybody thought they were going to be great, and then they stunk to high heaven the next year. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen to this Marlins team next season, but I'm not going to be ready to make them my dark horse pick to make the playoffs. I think the Atlanta Braves were a team that never could get out of their own way this season between the injuries.
And they're going to run it back next year.
Right, they're going to run it back next year. I think you're still terrified because, oh God, Michael Harris Jr. and Ozzie Albies kind of looked like they forgot how to play baseball.
Except no, that's not true. But the second half of the year, Michael Harris was one of the best players in baseball.
He was still not amazing. He was still chasing pitches like a fiend.
Well, his second half stats were among the best in baseball.
Right. But he was also among maybe the worst player in baseball
in the first half. Yeah. But
54 OPS plus.
You're gonna get Austin Riley back. You're gonna get a full season out of Strider. You're gonna get Schwellen back. If I can say that.
They have to be better.
They're gonna run it back one more time.
Based on the basis of that this was a year that kind of just felt like everything went wrong for the Atlanta Braves. You should be better next season just off of that. And the Nationals, I think it was a disappointing year for the Nationals.
On the field, it's a disappointing year because we thought they'd make progress. I think the progress they made is that they finally have a new Pobo, Paul Taboni, coming over from the Red Sox. And I think that the stability is what that franchise has lacked. And they finally have ownership. They finally have a baseball guy in the front office that I think everybody respects. And I expect they will get better from here because they have some talent on that roster.
For sure. And, we look over at the National League Central, and the Milwaukee Brewers did what we did not expect them to do, as neither of us picked them to win that division, and they repeated as NL Central divisions. And not only that, they had the best record in the National League, topping it at 97 wins.
So Pat Murphy has to be manager of the year in the National League, as far as I'm concerned, mainly because I just didn't think there was any way they could do it again. I think they did it with Mirrors last year.
And clearly it's not Mirrors.
And it's not. This is just a good team that plays good, solid baseball. They've got a lot of young players that contribute in ways that other teams don't get their young players to do.
I think they have a good starting pitching. They have a solid starting lineup. I think the thing that I've noticed with playoff baseball, a lot of it lives and dies by the solo home run. And that's really the one thing
That's not the Brewers' forte.
Now, the Brewers' forte is manufacturing runs. They're great.
I mean, they've got guys that can hit home runs, and Churio and Christian Yelich.
But they're not
a mashing team.
They're not a mashing team. And sometimes in the playoffs, like we've seen so many games where it's just like, yeah, but Harper and Schwarber both hit 2 solo home runs, and then they end up winning 4-2 because of that.
Like the Guardians had last year, right? They had their David Fry and Noel,
Johnsky Noel.
Johnsky Noel. They hit big home runs in the playoffs, and the Brewers are going to need Sal Frelick. We're going to need, some of their guys that you don't know as well hit home runs. Bryce Terang.
Because it's so hard to create runs in the playoffs. You need home runs to get runs that you don't expect to get. Home runs with men on base in the playoffs is almost backbreaking. Just because it's like, oh man, all of a sudden you're down 3-0, and that's so hard to pull off. So, and I think that what might be the biggest weakness of the team that finished second in the NL Central, we would say, is their inability for their starting pitchers to prevent runs in the Chicago Cubs, because while they had some great starting pitching to beginning off this year, they did not have great starting pitching down the second half this year.
No, and you have right now their most reliable pitcher might be Cade Horton, who's a rookie.
But you hate putting that on a rookie,
and that's a lot to ask. I think Imanaga is okay,
but he's inconsistent.
Jameson Taillon is okay.
Mm-hmm.
You lost Justin Steele early in the year, which we thought might have been the death knell for the Cubs. And to their credit, they got off to a great start because they just knocked the hell out of the ball for the first 2 months.
Is an unbelievably strong lineup.
They're solid up and down.
I think they might be the third best lineup overall in the National League, behind the Phillies and the Dodgers, just because the top ends of those lineups.
But I will say this about the Cubs too: I think they are pitch-toable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think there's a lot of guys in there at the playoff level, and when you have a whole week to prepare for them or whatever it is, to think, okay, I can get Michael Busch out, I can get PCA out,
right, especially because second half PCA out. Yeah, anybody could get second half PCA out.
So I think that's a problem for them.
They're going to need somebody, whether it's Ian Happ or Michael Busch or Seiya Suzuki. Somebody's got to have a huge series. Kyle Tucker. You forget he's on the Cubs sometimes.
No, because he had not a great second half at all, and when he was playing well, the Cubs were one of the most dynamic offenses in the major leagues.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I think the Brewers are the opposite of that, like you said, because they're the manufacturing runs team. At least up and down the Brewers lineup, I have a pretty good feeling that they're going to get the bat in the ball. You're saying they need to hit a few of them out of the ballpark, and I wouldn't disagree with that.
Right. And again, you go to the team that stole the wild card spot away from the Mets, and the Mets, though, you could argue the Mets handed it to them by losing today.
They did.
The Cincinnati Reds. And I think the thing with the Cincinnati Reds, and probably why the Los Angeles Dodgers would have much preferred to be playing the Mets, is you're like, I don't like the idea of facing Hunter Green in game 1 of a wild card series. And then Andrew Abbott's right behind him. That's 2 pretty good starting pitchers. I don't really like that.
Nick Lodolo is
right. Nick Lodolo, I think, was one of the only pitchers in Major League Baseball to throw 2 complete games this year.
So I agree with you, and I guess I'm happy for the Reds. Despite the fact that I'm disappointed the Mets aren't playing any more baseball this year. I think that the Dodgers, are certainly the better team.
It's impossible to pick this series as a Met fan and pick it for the Dodgers without sounding like you were just eating the largest bunch of sour grapes. If we sit here and go, yeah, I expect the Los Angeles Dodgers to handle the Cincinnati Reds, which I do.
Anybody that would play the Dodgers in this round in the National League,
you would expect to
I
get
would
handled.
pick the Dodgers.
If
it doesn't really matter who it is.
If we're playing them, I'd expect the Mets to get manhandled.
Exactly, that's the way they'll get. But good on the Reds for making the playoffs. They haven't done it in a while. Terry Francona, in my opinion, made a difference. Because he helped them when they were shaky, and I think was the right guy to talk to these guys about here's how you manage this part of the season.
And we go over to St. Louis just real quick, and they're a team kind of like Minnesota, where it's just like, okay, what are you doing?
They lasted longer than I thought they would. I mean, I got to give it to the Cardinals, because I looked at that team of misfits and I thought, how are they even competing? That whole team looked like a weird team.
Right.
I don't like their manager. I think
I don't like that team.
I don't. I just, there's something about the team, and I like the individual players. Like from a Met perspective, if I could get Brandon Donovan to come and play second base for the Mets,
that'd be great.
I'd be in a second. So the individual players,
if we could fire Jeff McNeil into the sun,
isn't that the truth? So they gave it the old school try and lasted as long as they could. And yet, the other team in the division that didn't make it was the Pirates, and they just continually disappoint.
And I think here's the thing. The problem here is what it is. And Pirate fans will know this already. Paul, you have what is the best pitcher and will be the Cy Young winner in the National League in Paul Skenes. And every Pirate fan knows that unless something changes, you're going to now have to spend the next 2.5 years listening to Met fans like us talk about how
Can't wait to get Paul Skenes.
We're going to sign Paul Skenes because
Steve Cohen's going to back up a truck.
Yeah, we need to start in pitching. And it's like, no, the Pittsburgh Pirates should do the right thing. Recognize the fact that you have one of the best pitchers in the National League. Go out, make some moves this offseason, and try and compete.
Get a team.
Right. Put some guys around those guys so you're not wasting the best pitcher in the National League. Enough.
Skenes had an ERA this year, and he had to have that last start where he didn't give up any runs to get it down from over 2 to 1.97. There are not a lot of pitchers that have sub-2 ERAs for a season. We're going to talk about Skenes' 1.97 for years to come. That's how good it was, and we're not realizing it right now.
Right, because he plays for a 71-win Pirate.
Exactly.
We go over to the NL West, and we've said a bit about the Dodgers. They have made the playoffs.
They tried to kick it away, by the way.
Unlike last year, they do not feel like a juggernaut that is unassailable.
Well, and I think the reason for me is, and I'm the only one saying this, is that their bullpen, which was rock solid for every playoff run they've been in, is not rock solid.
There's nobody more afraid of the Los Angeles Dodger bullpen than Los Angeles Dodger fans.
Davey Roberts is looking out there going, I'm not sure anybody.
Shohei, can you pitch every inning too?
Exactly, and he's gonna be a very important piece of that team. I wouldn't have a problem with them moving into the bullpen, but that won't happen.
And you're going to watch, and people in the MLB baseball fans, you're going to watch the NL playoffs this season, and you will see why Shohei Ohtani will be the MVP for the foreseeable future, because literally nobody has ever done what he is doing. Yeah. He is not only one of the best hitters in baseball, he's also one of the best pitchers. It's so cool.
I think they talk about trying to compare him to Babe Ruth in terms of the hitting, and so Babe Ruth never had strikeouts when he had home runs, right? Because he wasn't doing the same thing. He wasn't hitting time. He was already done by the time he started hitting home runs.
Shohei goes out there. He
has 55 homers and he strikes out 100 batters.
And he's such a good pitcher. Yeah. It's so awesome. And I think a team we haven't really spoken a lot about throughout this entire thing is the other playoff team from the NL West
that tried to win that division, and they kind of fell apart in terms of what could have been a nice run at the end for them to take it.
That is a powerful lineup in San Diego. They have good players.
Yeah, I would pick them as the team more likely than the Brewers to get to the NLCS.
Mm-hmm. And play the Phillies.
And play the Phillies if they get there. And I could see the Padres going all the way to the World Series. I even though I think the Dodgers, for me, would still be. It's hard to bet against that team. I'm worried about the bullpen, but I think that they do turn it on at playoff time and play their best baseball under pressure.
I worry about this San Diego team in the playoffs because for 2.5 games last season in the playoffs, everything looked like it was going amazing, and then something broke. And they made it back to the playoffs. But I got to see them win a series now before I'll believe in them in the playoffs again. Because
that's fair.
That's a team that could be jumping at ghosts in the playoffs.
That's fair. And you and I both picked the D-backs to finish second. And they kept trying to run up the mountain all season long, and they played pretty well at the end.
Sold off a fair number of pieces at the trade deadline. It wasn't until they did that. That might be the most encouraging thing for you as a D-back fan. Oh, wow, we sold a bunch of things, and then we started playing better. So, okay, that gives me some hope for next season.
And they got a season from Corbin Carroll that is underappreciated by most fans. The guy had a ridiculous season.
He had a terrible April and May, and then he remembered, oh, yeah, I'm Corbin Carroll.
Yeah, so I do think the D-backs going forward, they're a little puzzling because once they lost Corbin Burns, I think that was huge for their playoff run, and he is not going to be ready to pitch at the beginning of next year. I'm not sure if you can run out Zach Gallen again at the front of your rotation. And Merrill Kelly's not there anymore. He got traded finally. So I think the Diamondbacks are in a little bit of trouble. The team that you thought would finish ahead of the Padres, and I had the Padres ahead of these guys, and neither of us picked the Padres.
Right, I was feeling really good about that Giant pick when they made that Devers move.
Yeah, well, you mentioned to me before we got on that Devers played 163 games this year. Unfortunately, when he played for the team that he's on, the team didn't play all that well.
Right, they played worse.
When he's with the Red Sox, they were bad, and when he went to the Giants, they got that bad. So you wonder a little bit about like what's going on
Right. It
here.
wasn't like he played badly.
Yeah, but the teams didn't play well when he was on the team. So I think
I think he's a guy that, like Juan Soto, will benefit from having an off season where he was already a member of the team.
that's fair.
I think Soto will be much more integrated into the Mets structure next season, because we're going to go into the Mets in just a second here. Because I suppose we have to talk about the Colorado Rockies seasons. I'm assuming they would prefer we didn't.
Yeah, and the Rockies, are no closer to being a team that seems like okay. So what do the Rockies do well? Well, they don't hit very well. Well, number one, that really makes me crazy that the Rockies don't hit well. Because if you're going to do anything in Colorado, you should hit the darn ball. They never pitch well. Other than that, they're fine.
Right. Well, the Washington Nationals finished with the second worst run differential in baseball at negative 212. The Colorado Rockies doubled that. They had a negative run differential of 424. So not only were they the worst pitching team in the baseball, they also didn't score at all.
And by the way, I haven't checked the figures on this, but I noticed that the Guardians, who won the American League Central, had a negative 6 run differential, and I wonder how many times a division winner has had a negative run differential for the season.
I mean, it's a fun differential for them. They're in the playoffs, and we as Met fans are not.
So yeah, the Mets. We can get to the Mets, and they had 4 players, the Mets, who had not necessarily career years, but excellent years.
If you're a Met fan, Soto went 40-30, almost went 44. Lindor went 30-30. Pete hit 39, 38, 39.
Mets had 2 guys that went 30-30 for the third time
Pete
in Major League history.
40 homers, had 125 something RBIs.
Yeah, he did.
Nimmo hit 25 plus homers, drove in a bunch of
90 runs.
You got the seasons you expected from your top 4.
You can't expect for a better year from those guys.
You got nothing from basically anybody else.
Nothing you could count on.
Nothing you could count on. You
got a little game here, a little game there offensively.
You had a streak down the stretch where Bet Brady, until he got hurt in this last series, gave you good games at third base in the second half. Alvarez, when he wasn't hurt, played well once he came back from getting demoted.
But being available is part of the, it's not his fault, but it's still
our big free agent signing in center field, Jose Siri, hit a ball off his leg in April, broke it, and we never saw him again. And, you had large swaths of the season where you had Jeff McNeil playing center, which was rough to watch.
He finished the season on a miserable run.
We had any game where Mark Vientos played third was painful to watch. The only thing that was maybe more painful to watch was Ronnie Mauricio.
Yeah, well, and he's a guy who doesn't even look like he knows there's a game going on when he's playing in the field.
Right. For anybody that didn't in the Met game, he walked today, and after ball 4, the dugout's yelling at him to go. The catcher
go to first. You walked.
The umpire had to tell him he walked. It was unbelievable.
And the other night he didn't. There's a guy stealing third base, and he's standing there far away from the base because I guess they positioned him there. Doesn't even bother to run over there to take the throw, and the guy just walks into third base and scores a run.
So and I think the thing is, despite all the things we just said about the position players, I don't even really blame them. The blame for the season pretty much solely rests on the backs of the starting pitching.
Well, and let's face it, injuries played a huge. So that's where you can say, all right, you basically didn't get the years you expected from Anaya, who didn't start the year with the Mets.
Injury hurt.
Injury, and they signed him for 3 years after he had a career year last year. And
which I was nervous about.
The worry is that maybe there was the career year, and you're going to get the inconsistency of the rest of it. He's got 2 more years with the Mets. You transitioned a guy who was never been a starter in Clay Holmes to a starter, who ended up having a solid major league season.
He was probably the best wire-to-wire starter for the Mets.
And that is not the way the Mets drew it up.
That is a specific way of phrasing that, because shockingly, I'd say probably their best starter this season was Nolan McLean, the rookie who had 8 starts.
Exactly, and you said it before we got on air. The big disappointment for the Mets was Kodai Senga.
Well, I said Kodai Senga for Met fans. He is probably the straw that broke the camel's back. All of the other things.
Do you blame that on Pete for making the crazy throw in June, and he pulled his leg, and he was never the same guy after that?
Because Kodai Senga might be the most fragile man in baseball.
I think that's fair.
I think that there's a lot of Met fans I've noticed that they're kind of annoyed with Senga because of the amount of things that apparently need to be done in order.
It's always something.
Right. He's got to make sure he's got the right number of games between each start. Which is why we have to have a 6-man rotation just for him.
He's about as tough as a wet paper towel.
Right. And it was a year. I think he is the type of pitcher. We've seen it with other guys before like him. He throws that ghost fork. And it is such a finicky pitch where if he doesn't have it, he doesn't have anything.
And the guys just don't swing at it.
Right, because they know it's not going to be a strike.
It's never a strike, so why should we even bother swinging at it? So that really hurt them. They got a tremendous start to the season to a retread they picked up in Griffin Canning, who was having his career year until he ruptured his Achilles and didn't pitch the rest of the year. So it's a combination
McGill wouldn't, pitched well-ish for the first half, started trailing off Tommy John.
And David
Peterson was their most considered
all-star. He played he was an all-star guy.
And then
forgot how to pitch
in September. Just I don't know if he hit a wall or what.
He did throw 30 or 40 more innings than he ever had before. But again, it sounds like excuses when you hear stuff like that, right?
I think at the end of the day, though, I think one of the things that we both looked over is it's almost like, oh, thank God it's over. I'm not that upset.
I'm a little relieved because I think the Mets would have got their teeth kicked in by the Dodgers.
Reds have a much better chance of beating the Dodgers.
I hate to say you're right.
The Mets.
You're right. And there wasn't. We said it before, but there wasn't any mojo.
They were 0-66.
Oh, it's 67. They didn't do it today either.
They didn't do that. 0-67 when trailing after the eighth inning.
They're the only team in the major leagues to not win one game when they trailed after 8 innings. Okay, that is the antithesis of a winning baseball team.
They didn't have walk-off victories. It didn't mean they technically didn't have a come from behind.
Right, they were tied. If you were tied, it's not a come from behind.
But they never had a game where they were trailing in the eighth inning. After the eighth inning and won. And they just, unlike last year, where it felt like everything would just kind of work out for them, this was a year where nothing worked out for them.
And, the management said when they traded Verlander and Scherzer saying, look, we're not going to win this year, and we're not planning on being competitive in 25 to win a World Series. It's 26 is the year. They told him so. So Scherzer and Verlander said, okay, you can get rid of us. And that's fine. And they did. And it wasn't a terrible thing that they did. Those guys, it's not like they went other places and were stalwarts or whatnot.
Certainly
but and basically it came true, right? These guys last year was the anomaly. Last year's run to the National League Championship Series was the surprise, and it fooled Met fans and to a degree the Met management
And then
that they had a chance this year.
And then the first 2 months made it look like
45-24, best record in baseball, into June 12th, and then they were well under 500 the rest of the season. And like Bill Parcells used to say, your record is you are what your record says you are, and that was the Mets. So look, for all those that wanted to watch the Mets suffer with the biggest payroll in baseball, the second biggest payroll in baseball, and Steve Cohen's money and all that kind of stuff, we suffered. It was painful to watch this team play.
If you really wanted to watch them suffer, you would have preferred for them to make the playoffs because they would have gotten destroyed.
You get shut out 11-0 in both games in LA or something like.
Downs in LA.
They were cooked.
They were cooked
at the end of the season. The team was cooked. Mentally, they were cooked. They almost looked a little relieved that, this is finally over. I can't take this anymore.
Right. And there are certain players that I will be glad when I'm not watching them play in a Mets uniform next year.
Yeah, I can't even think about, what are you going to do for next season? Because you have to go through a whole playoff run here now and see, okay, so who surprised you in the playoffs that you think, I didn't really think that the Brewers were going to be this juggernaut and kill everybody in the playoffs and win the NLCS and the World Series.
Right.
This stuff can happen still.
When we're back here next week talking about it, we'll have a couple of
we'll be through the wild card round when we go next week.
We'll forecast the divisional round. It should be very exciting, and I'm excited for playoff baseball.
I wanted to ask you before we go off. So, AL MVP, Aaron Judge or Cal Raleigh?
Judge.
Me too.
It's just a more complete season.
Yeah, and I have trouble rooting for or picking an MVP who batted under 250.
When Judge hits 53, he hits 7 less home runs than him.
Yeah,
and he hits almost 100 points better.
Yeah. It's just a better and it came out the other day that Raleigh has a much higher F WAR than B WAR, right? Fangraphs WAR versus Baseball Reference WAR. And Sean Foreman, who we've had on this podcast a couple of times, came out and defended it and saying, look, well, I'm not defending him, and just say, look, the difference is that
Raleigh's judged against other catchers.
No, Baseball Reference WAR does not include framing. Catcher framing and Fangraphs WAR does include catcher framing. So Raleigh is one of the better framers, and
so that
gives his boost into the like. So I'm not a big believer in framing, so I'm going to be more on the because I think the new the robot umps are going to pretty much removed for me, even though they say it's going to not completely make it go away. I think that's what
it's going to lessen the impact.
So I love the season that Cal Raleigh had. I think it's special. I can't wait to see him play in the playoffs and hit, hopefully clutch home runs and all that stuff. But Aaron Judge is my MVP as well. We got the Skenes and you say Scooble. I kind of agree there. And Shohei.
It's Shohei.
Yeah, it is. So enjoy the week, folks. By the time we're talking next Sunday, we're going to be into the division series.
Let's enjoy some playoff baseball.